From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Migrant crossings surge again at the southern border as the White House gives temporary protected status to Venezuelans in the country, and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley lays out her economic agenda in New Hampshire. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnists Alicia Finley and Kim Strassel. It seemed for a time that migration had receded as a political issue, but it may be about to make a big comeback. Here's the top of a CBS News story. The number of migrants apprehended by the U.S. immigration agents after crossing the southern border illegally has soared to near record levels in September. Roughly 140,000 migrants without authorization during the first 20 days of this month. That comes out to 6,900 each day, and it's a 60% increase from July. Alicia, how do you make sense of this uptick in the flow? Is this just a matter of the break in the summer heat?
So I think there are a few things happening. I think you mentioned that this is a break from the summer heat, and typically migration does pick up again during the cooler months. One other thing that I think is happening is, at least with the Biden administration, is claiming are rumors that if you come to the country, you're going to get automatically let in. But there's also a lot of truth to that. So after the Title 42 lapse, which was back in May, and that was just before the hot summer months. And if you recall, the administration was touting how its interventions after the lapse of Title 42. Actually, I should backtrack. If you recall what Title 42 is, that was CDC's public health emergency that allowed the officers at the border to immediately expel migrants crossing with less procedural safeguards or due process than would normally take place. And this was Title 42 was at least attributed by many to helping to control the flow of migrants at the border. Now, with the lapse of Title 42, and that was when into the summer, you probably didn't actually see as much of the effect because it was so hot during the summer, and migration tends to trend down during the hotter summer months. The administration also imposed several new policies that were designed to curb migration from South America and Central America largely. And these policies allowed migrants from select countries such as Venezuela and others in Central America to apply for work authorizations from their home country at embassies before actually making the trip to the U.S. And this was intended to encourage migrants to stay where they essentially were rather than migrating and crossing the border illegally and then claiming asylum. But the problem is that there really are no now repercussions for families making these treks. So for individual migrants, the U.S. has the capacity to, in many cases, just keep them in Mexico, because there is still not the remain in Mexico policy that Trump put in place. The Biden administration has continued a policy that somewhat resembles it, but only applies to certain migrant groups, and it really can't be used for families. So the issue really here is the family migration. And these rumors the Biden administration is calling out or flagging is that basically if you come to the border, you claim asylum, you can actually walk right up to an officer at the border, and basically they will take you, get processed. And while initially the plan was to put ankle bracelets on and then release them into the U.S. pending their official asylum court date, which could be 4 or 5 years off, they don't even have the capacity to process these migrants and to actually put the ankle bracelets on, so they can't even track them anymore. I think they're only using the ankle bracelet program for 1 or 2% who come to the U.S. So there really are no repercussions for migrating across the border, what is essentially illegally, even though these migrants claim asylum. They're really coming for economic reasons. And so I think that that's the other thing we're seeing is the incentives and the continued pull from the U.S. economy. Jobs are still growing. There's still a lot of demand for labor here. And there really, again, aren't any repercussions for migrating illegally.
Kim, what do you make of the White House's move on Wednesday to grant another round of temporary protected status to migrants in the United States from Venezuela? And here's the statement from Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Temporary protected status provides individuals already present in the United States with protection from removal when the conditions in their home country prevent a safe return. That is the situation that Venezuelans who arrived here on or before July 31st of this year find themselves in. And this is the second round of TPS for Venezuelans. The first round was granted to about 250,000 people in March of 2021, or at least that's when they had to be in the country by. Now the administration is saying that this new round would include about 500,000 Venezuelan nationals who, again, have been in the country by July 31st, 2023. And Secretary Mayorkas says that it is critical that they understand that those who arrived here after that point are not eligible for such protection. But Kim, I can only think that this would increase the kind of draw that Alicia is talking about.
Right. I mean, if you listen to Mayorkas, the official explanation for why this is being granted is that conditions in Venezuela are still just simply so bad that these people could not be asked to be returned there. And therefore, if they're going to be here, we will issue them the ability to work. In reality, this is a political decision. This comes after intense lobbying from people like New York City Mayor Eric Adams, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, saying that all of these immigrants who are sitting in their cities are also being barred from taking part in work or being productive members of the New York society. And therefore, they're having to essentially take care of them, house them, shelter them, feed them, etc. So this is being done in part to help out a lot of mayors in blue cities who are running out of money in their attempts to deal with Biden's migrant crisis. Yes, Mayorkas made a great big deal out of saying that this only applies to people who came before July 31st. It's critical. Folks understand that. But, this is the same guy who keeps telling us the border is closed. This administration set the groundwork at the very beginning with an open armed immigration policy and dismantling Trump's immigration policies that were working. And as a result, the word of mouth and many other things and every other signal they have sent has been keep coming. And I can't see that any Venezuelan is going to look at Mayorkas and even if they hear those words and believe that this administration really means it. Again, as you noted, Kyle, this is the second time that this has happened. So if I were a Venezuelan, I would instead have the view, well, look, they've done it twice before. I just need to get over the border and I'm going to be part of the third round of such temporary provisions when they come out. And so again, latest example of this administration saying one thing but sending a very different message, which is going to continue hurting it down at the border.
On the other hand, I suppose the argument for this, Alicia, is one part that if the worry is that granting these Venezuelans the ability to work in the United States will increase the draw for other Venezuelans, well, there are already 750,000 of them here who have been now granted this temporary protected status. So it's not as if the lack of it seemed to be much of a deterrent anyway. Obviously, those people came without any promise of this status. And by the way, under the rules as they exist right now, when someone comes to the United States seeking asylum, they are not allowed to even file for a work permit until 150 days after that asylum claim has been filed. And then in practicality, my understanding is that it often ends up being longer than that. So the other argument, it seems, from people like Mayor Adams is we have these people here. They're in our cities. They're in our country. Under the asylum laws that we have, they can't be deported. We have to let them go through the asylum system. And is it better to have them sitting on the dole for 150 days or more, or is it better to allow them to fill some of these job openings that we have?
Right. So I think actually what's already happening is they are filling some of the job openings. I think there's a huge underground economy. Actually, if you look at the Labor Department's statistics, the increase in foreign born workers has been 67 times the number of native born workers over the last 2 years. So they are coming in and they are filling job openings. Some of these, again, they're underground jobs, as in, they're being paid in cash. And maybe they also, some of them may have forged work authorizations. I mean, that in some ways that's actually really good for employers. And as I was noting, that's also one of the draws that, continue to bring them in. And as you said, they can't really even apply for work authorizations until 5 to 6 months. And then it usually takes about another 12 to 18 months before getting them. And that's partly just because the backlog at the State Department and the HHS, which has to process all of this paperwork, and they're getting inundated. And obviously, they also have to process the green cards for actual legal migrants. And those are actually, there's a backlog there too, which is a big problem. That's another incentive to come illegally because you're ending up having to wait even longer nowadays to get a green card and actually come in legally through visas or green cards. The issue here with the TPS is it's essentially legalization through the back door. And I think migrants know that. TPS, it's been extended for migrants from, various countries over the years for when there's been an earthquake or something like that, or there's civil war in their home countries or ethnic conflict. And it's very rarely terminated. Again, it's almost always extended. It's temporary, 18 months, but then it gets extended another 18 months later. And, there are in cases like Haiti, the earthquake, 2010, and it's still being provided. So they know that once this is granted, they essentially have legal status forever. For practical reasons, once someone has been in the country for a while, has become enmeshed in the community, has started working and all that, to uproot them creates humanitarian and real, human concerns for the same reasons that removing DACA did, right? These people are contributing, they have friends, they have family. So presidential administrations in the past have been very reluctant to automatically end TPS. And so these programs just get extended again and again, which is essentially backdoor legalization. And I think that's the concern, is that essentially you're providing a de facto amnesty, or at least that would be the argument against doing what Biden is doing.